everyone, it is May 17th, 2019, and thanks for joining episode 11 of Yogakane. Yoga cracks us open. Say crack again. Crack. I hope some of you caught that reference to Mean Girls. That movie just always cracks me up. Anyways, hope everyone's doing well. I'm doing pretty good. The spring has been really uplifting, and I'm really just excited for what this summer has in store for me and the podcast. So my guest for this episode really made me think more about my life off of the yoga mat, because I don't know about you, but the more that I practice the asana or physical yoga practice, the more I want to take care of my body and mind. I feel myself, or I find myself being more intentional and aware of what I put into my body and the people that I choose to surround myself with. What I tend to think is, how is this going to make me feel after this experience? Is this going to serve me? Is it going to bring my best self forward? Or even more importantly, my authentic self forward? What the asana practice does is it starts to form little cracks within where we begin to look into ourselves and start to step into a more self-aware life. Throughout this episode, my guest, Kelly Thielbahr, and I return back to this theme. I first met Kelly at Northwest Yoga Feast last summer. P.S. Tickets are still available for Northwest Yoga Feast, and group discount rates are available. Please feel free to message me your questions about Northwest Yoga Feast, which is happening this summer, July 19th through the 21st, just outside of Sandpoint, Idaho. Anyways, this was my first class at the feast, and Kelly led me through this incredible fluid experience on my yoga mat. Her cueing was inspirational, and the sequence set me up to feel centered and strong. Now, whenever I'm in Sandpoint, I take a yoga class from either Kelly or another teacher at We Yoga. So Kelly is the co-owner of We Yoga with Christine Matt. We Yoga is a new yoga studio located in the heart center of Sandpoint, Idaho. We Yoga literally puts out vibes of community and love. Honestly, when you step into We Yoga, it's like you get a giant hug. The more I got to know Kelly leading up to this interview, I discovered a sincere and intentional human. She and her husband own and operate Clearview Horizon, a residential treatment center for teenage girls who are troubled with life-controlling issues or misbehavior that may be threatening their future. And in this episode, Kelly talks to us about what it's like to teach in this kind of environment. I hope you enjoy this episode with the beautiful and soulful Kelly. So I know that you guys have been asked this a lot, but kind of going back to the space, like what is We Yoga? What does that represent? What does that stand for?
Yeah. It's really interesting because I think like if you really go back to the true, like the very beginning, the very like true vision of this place was to create community. So you and I create we, right? And like I was telling a couple of the practitioners that this morning, we gave all of our founding 40 members, so people that signed up before we opened, got an unlimited monthly passive yoga for the lifetime of their membership for $79 a month, which is a phenomenal deal.
Yeah.
And we only sold 40 of those. It was sort of we called it our Founders 40 special.
That's so nice.
And we gave them all tanks that say this, that I am we. Mm-hmm. And one of them this morning was just so grateful for it. She's like, that is so nice. We should be giving you something. And you're giving us gifts.
I heard that.
And I was like, without you, there is no we. Like you guys are the gift. You know, you showing up and supporting this space and like really the true vision of what it is. So we is designed to be a place for everybody, right?
Yeah.
We want to make yoga accessible to all ages, all levels, all everything. So every one of our classes is designed to fit all levels. We do have a couple of classes. Our Tuesday and Thursday night at 5:30 and our Saturday morning at 10 are called Slow Flow. And those would be designed for maybe like more of a true beginner. But a slow flow also, to me, is very fundamentally based.
Yeah.
And is, even as a yoga teacher, awesome. Like, I love taking fundamental classes. So
Me too.
Jamie teaches those, and that is her gift. She is really, really great at kind of that therapeutic approach of like meeting somebody that's got an injury, or somebody that's new, or somebody that maybe just wants to move a little bit slower and more intentionally. And that was, we actually shifted that. That wasn't something we were initially going to offer, but we had a lot of people requesting that. And so week 1, we shifted and said, we're going to offer, because we want to make this place accessible for everyone.
Oh, that's great.
We want it to be a place of community, of connection, of inspiration, of hospitality. We want everyone to have a hospitable experience, and that word is really kind of one of our key pillars. Another one of our key pillars is consistency. We want people to know without a doubt what they will experience every time they walk through those doors, that if my name is on the schedule, I will be here teaching, that the room will be heated to the same temperature, the volume of the music will be fairly similar. You'll have the eucalyptus hand towel waiting for you. Like, you'll have that guaranteed 5-minute shavasana at the end, because in my experience, that lack of consistency in studios can really throw practitioners off if they don't know what they're going to get when they show up.
Yeah. Have you always taught like that, like with that consistency?
No.
Okay.
No, and I think that like starting on time, ending on time, I think that is the really, really cool thing about getting to create your own studio, is you get to look at all of the things you've experienced over the years that have worked, and all of the things that maybe haven't worked, and say, this is what we're going to. And so we've been super blessed with our instructors. We've got Jamie, Terry, Katie Bradish, Abby Helander, and Rose Olson, and then Christine and I, and we all sort of share this very similar vision.
Cool.
We were very, very selective about that group that we chose, because within our teaching, we all have our own authentic style, our own authenticity, right? So my teaching style is going to be different than Christine's, it's going to be different than Jamie's, but within that there has to be a common thread, something that binds us, something that creates a similar experience, but not the same, because right?
I hear you. Like that's really neat. It kind of makes a community between the teachers, and then also the students. They know whoever they come to, they're going to get something similar, but it's going to. It doesn't really even matter who's teaching at that point, because they're just going to arrive in the space. Yeah. Because it's not really the teacher. Like,
it's not. Yeah. And I think when we reach that point as a yogi, where we are not dependent upon the teacher for our experience. Yeah. Right? I mean, I love that, because I think people sometimes get attached to like, oh, I only want to go to this person or that person, and that's my teacher. And well, okay, we all have our favorites. We all have our preferences. That is great. But to be able to create your own experience, and even if a teacher is offering options that maybe aren't great or don't work for you, like you're dialing into your own practice.
So what you're saying right now then is about this, you're putting this on the student. Like it's the student's responsibility.
I really do believe that.
To get what they want out of the class, regardless of the teacher.
I believe that.
Yeah.
I mean, I believe as an instructor, we have that responsibility to show up, to hold space, to provide that consistent experience. But if you show up and you're like, gosh, I've got a head cold, or maybe I did have too many glasses of wine for dinner last night. Like, it's really your responsibility to take care of yourself in that practice, because I don't occupy your body. I don't know your experiences. I don't know your injuries. I can support them, and I can offer you options and modifications and variations that might support that. But like, there really is a true, I think, this is my own opinion, just an accountability of showing up and taking care of yourself.
Yeah, I heard this Dharma talk from this guy at a studio over in New York where I used to live, and he was saying that he had a student come in, first time he ever met him. Guy came to class, you didn't really, this guy is teaching like 50 people. So he's not really noticing that one guy, but the guy leaves. He's like, thank you so much. That was the best yoga class of my life. So a few days go by, and then the teacher who was teaching a few days ago was now a student, and he was a student with that same guy, and same studio. So he's standing up front with the guy that just taught. This new student comes up. He's like, thank you so much. That was the best class of my life.
Wow.
And then a few days go by, same thing happened, but with another teacher. The student comes up and says, thank you so much. That was the best class of my life. And then this teacher was like, I've heard you say this now 3 times after each class. And then the student looked at him and he's like, well, yeah, because it's my practice. He's like, I make it what I need it. And it's the best class of my life. He's like, every class is the best class of my life. And I was just like,
that's cool.
It's so cool.
It's true. And so the flip side of it, so here's a story. This was a studio I taught at in Spokane. I'll leave names and businesses out of but there was a lady that showed up, and it was her birthday, and she was super excited on her birthday to take a class from this particular instructor. And that particular instructor's name was on the schedule at the studio. She showed up. This instructor wasn't there. There was like a teacher in training sub there to teach the class. And so immediately she's devastated. Like, it's my birthday. It's my birthday yoga class. I guess I'm here. I guess I'll just do it anyways. She's unhappy. A few days later, she comes back into the studio to meet with the owner, or not the owner, but the teacher that was supposed to, I guess it was the owner at the time, and said, I just want you to know that you ruined my birthday. And this instructor was like, I didn't ruin your birthday. You ruined your birthday. Because you were attached to having a certain experience that day on your yoga mat. And in that moment, you didn't know how to create your own experience. Now, the flip side of that is, like, when I'm sitting here preaching this idea of consistency, like, I do believe we are selling a service. It is a professionalism. That if you're going to put someone's name on the schedule, that person, like, it's like we're paying for a service. That person should be on the schedule and should be teaching. So I think there's 2 sides of that coin.
And it takes time for students to get like that awareness that it's...
Yes, but that was like such an eye-opening moment for me, because I was like, this particular person is basically asking that person to create her happiness for her. And none of us can do that for anyone. Like, it's not my job to make you happy. It's not my job to make my kids happy, my husband happy. Like, that happiness, right, that comes from within. Now, we can support it. We can nourish it. We can provide experiences that create joy and happiness. But I think when we get attached or reliant upon the teacher to create our experience, we're missing the mark.
Now, it also, thinking about that, you said it was a student teacher. That student teacher is extremely, I'm still a student teacher, I just got certified in June, but you're so aware of like everyone in that class that she probably picked up on that, and that probably really hurt him.
Right, because her body language was emanating like, I'm frustrated, I'm angry.
Might have heard something.
Right.
Yeah, we have to be very cautious with the words. Oh, wow.
So, like I said, 2 sides of that, of really creating consistency.
Yeah, I think that's really cool that you brought that up, though, about, so the students out there who are listening, we can just begin to maybe practice, like, okay, why am I on the mat? Like, how, like, regardless of the teacher, how can I make this like more about like me and like become my own teacher? I think that's really cool.
Because eventually we get to a place in our practice where it's like, I don't have to show up at We Yoga to be led through a class. I can actually roll out my yoga mat at home.
Or on a trip.
Or on a trip when I'm traveling, or maybe you find yourself at a place in your life where you don't have access to a yoga studio. I had a student here just the other day that moved from a very urban to a very rural area, and she's like, I'm just so grateful to be here because I don't have access to good yoga classes. Like, I'm self-practicing right now because I don't have access. So I think it gets to that point too, where it's like you don't have to become reliant upon that teacher to guide you. Like you could roll out your mat, or you don't even need a yoga mat, right?
Yeah.
And just practice anywhere, because we know like these poses, these sequences, they are within us.
Mm-hmm.
Like we know them.
Seriously.
Mm-hmm. It's in our DNA.
Yeah.
Right?
I know.
Mm-hmm.
I had this lady the other night. I was teaching her, and she's a newbie, and I was helping her out with something, and she just turns and looks at me. She's like, so do you just do this stuff at home?
Mm-hmm.
And I'm like, yeah. She's like, oh, that's so cool. I can just do this at home. I'm like, totally. It's like a light bulb went off, and it was so cool to see that, like in like her just kind of get this like light, like that she can just do this stuff at home, because
you don't need a studio, you don't need a teacher, you don't even need a mat.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, there's been times that I'm like, I'm just gonna go roll out on the grass or on my dock or whatever, and just practice yoga if I don't have those things. We don't need music. It's just like it's always there. It's always available and accessible. So that's actually like really one of the intentions of We Yoga, is to like really create a little bit more of a collaborative yoga community here in Sandpoint. So that would be really cool. Actually, I think it sort of breaks down those walls of separation of like, oh, this is, our studio, and this is it doesn't have to be that way. Like it's all sort of like community, because we offer something really different than the other studios in the area, and just to kind of keep that openness.
Do you find the other studios are like that, or not studios, but like the Sandpoint yoga community and the other studios are starting to kind of come into that collaborative mindset?
Yeah. I think Sandpoint is a small enough town that, that was one of the questions we got from people of, do you think Sandpoint is large enough that there's enough community here to sustain more than one yoga studio? And for Christine and I, that answer is 100% yes. That Sandpoint is growing and evolving and ready for more.
Yeah.
And it's really interesting just watching that. And we've really tried to differentiate and offer something really different than what already exists here. Doing the warm yoga versus the hot yoga, doing more vinyasa, not Bikram, like kind of finding those little pockets of where we can really shine, and then giving that space to the other studios where they can really shine, and then sending people that direction. Like, gosh, if this studio is not warm enough for you, like we know exactly where to send you. Yeah. And there's no competition, it's collaboration.
That's so
and
cool.
One of the terms that Christine and I have been using is cooperation. Okay. Yeah.
Can you define that, please?
Just cooperation is like we are cooperating with each other in a way that's not competitive, it's actually collaborative.
Cool. Oh, that's awesome.
Yeah, and we really feel like that is being received. And I think it speaks to the true essence of yoga, right?
Yeah.
Like if you think about it, like we are all one. There's no separation. So to create this, like, this is my studio and my space and my style, no. Yoga doesn't belong to any of us.
No, it doesn't.
We're all just sharing, right? What we know and what our experience has been. And so we was really designed to enhance what already exists and to grow it. And in a loving way that creates space for community.
Yeah, I mean, I've already talked to a few people already about We Yoga and what it's doing for the community. Like just this morning before the class, I talked to one of my friends that was here, and she's like, I love it here because it just feels like a community. People are talking, it's warm and open. I mean, you're on this beautiful corner lot, like overlooking.
And how cool is that? We could hear traffic going by. Like to me, it's very symbolic of life. That was one of the questions we got in the beginning. Like, you're going to have all that noise and all of that from that's actually the true yoga right there, of being able to, in the midst of all of that noise and chaos and honking of horns, right? Like that happened today in the middle of class, to be able to still go inward and stay connected to your breath, stay in the pose.
Yeah,
to not let that pull us out. Exactly.
Yeah. Yeah, I just went to the yoga accessibility training. Yeah, have you heard about that? So yoga accessibility, it's all about having an integrated class. So people in wheelchairs, might roll in, or you might have someone who's just like has something emotional or mental going on.
Yeah.
And so you'll have a class full of these different ability types, and then just still being able, so the training taught me how to teach to all yoga types.
To all levels, all styles. All,
yeah. So they taught us a sun salutation.
Water.
They taught us a sun salutation at the wall.
Yeah.
In a chair.
That's so cool.
Kneeling in a bed.
Yeah.
It was awesome. Like, it was the cool, like, after that training, my mind just was like blown open on all the ways.
Where was that?
It was at Yoga Joy North.
Okay.
So it's in Spokane.
Yeah, I haven't been to that studio.
It's a beautiful studio, new studio, and the training was just awesome. Like, and so their whole thing is like, so you don't have to do full eagle, but bring the aspects of eagle. So like, if someone can't go like this,
doesn't matter.
just cross the planes like that. And so all these really neat things. But I was kind of thinking of you and like that you and your husband.
The school.
Yeah.
Clearview Horizon.
Okay, Clearview.
Yeah, and I just did that yoga trauma training down in Santa Cruz, and it was kind of the same thing. Like, really, not the same thing, but similar in that sense of like being able to meet people really exactly where they are. And yeah, it's that whole trauma-informed yoga thing, just making sure we're being very intentional in the words we're using, in our body language, in the way we assist, entering people's space.
Yeah, it's so important.
To me, it felt a little bit redundant or like repetitive of what you would learn in a yoga teacher training and what you sort of know after teaching for many years of like, you're not just going to like abruptly enter someone's space and like flop your hands on them and twist them, and you're going to be intentional. So a lot of it was like, yeah, it's kind of a no-brainer, but such a great reminder, because when I was teaching, or when I teach out at the school with these girls, it's such a different experience than teaching in a space like this, because I get the privilege when I teach here of however many there was of you today, 8 yogis that are happy to be here, like have the means to practice yoga, have the time to carve out in their day, like really want to learn.
Yeah.
So in that setting, you have girls that don't want to be in program, that don't know how to occupy their own bodies because of maybe some of the trauma and life experience they've been through. So telling them to be present or breathe, they're like, I don't even know how to do that. Like, there might even be certain parts of their body that they don't even have physical sensation in because of certain traumas. And so, in dealing with different, like an example, one time I was teaching and I looked over and the girl was using her fingernail to sort of like, she was cutting her yoga mat, like being certain. And I was like, oh, like, can you not do that? But then I was like, you know what, that's where she is today. Like, she just is, she's feeling like that sort of internal, and that's her yoga practice today. So it was really like, that's what prompted me to do that training, was like, I need tools. I need a little bit more education of how to deal with this specific population, because of so many years of teaching in a studio environment where people want to be here, and then maybe teaching girls, they're like, I actually don't want to be here.
Yeah, like, screw you.
Like, this is maybe like the rock bottom point in my life where like I'm down and out, and my parents have shipped me off to this horrible program, and you know, I'm in the middle of therapy appointments, and yoga is just another thing on my schedule that I have to do today, not necessarily something that I want to do.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
So
I felt like herding cats, to be honest, because then they have like short attention spans too, of like, I got to go to the bathroom, or my ankle hurts, or like they'd be talking in the middle of class and wanting to share. And so I really that's, I think, the biggest thing I took away from that weekend of, yes, what you're doing is really hard. Like, because there's 20 some of them, it's not a small group, there's a lot of them. And so trying to like contain that space, but to really do it in a very loving and gentle way, but also like by maintaining some levels of respect and
respect for the practice, or respect for where they're at.
I think respect for the practice. I think for me, it's respect of where they're at, and I also think it's them learning to have respect for for me being up there teaching. And I remember one of the girls said, like, guys, she drives like 2 hours to come here and do this yoga class for us. Like, just listen, pay attention. So that part of like, please respect her. And some of the girls would sort of hold that boundary, while others were like, I'm not even going to do anything. I'm just going to lay here on my mat.
So what was your class like then? Like when you came in?
Yeah.
And
Well, it became very apparent early on that I was not going to be teaching this style of yoga, like what you and I did today, that these girls don't need to do chaturangas and, you know, all of the, what I call sort of the fancy yoga. They needed to just learn how to be in their bodies and breathe. So the first day that I really had a breakthrough with them, I said, I don't care if you guys do a single pose the entire class. Like, you can lay on your yoga mat in Shavasana for the next, we did 45-minute classes out there. Your only goal today is just to basically not talk, like just to go inward. So I played some really chill music, and I just talked with them. I talked with them about breath, and I talked about sort of that mind-body connection. I led them through some really, really simple, you know, very restorative, relaxing poses, nothing strenuous at all. And at the end, they were all like, this was the best. We loved this. Like,
oh, cool.
They needed to go inward and have a more relaxing, more restorative. And what I learned is that when you're in program and you live with 20 to 25 girls, maybe 30, there's a lot of noise and there's a lot going on. There's a lot of this, and there's not a lot of time carved out for downtime and quiet. And that's actually what they were craving in the practice. It was not more like music and noise and movement. It was
being told like all these different cues. It was more just about settling in.
About settling in, yeah. And I just turned down the lights, and by the end they were all just kind of like, you know, kind of like you were today, face down, like just curled up, just like in their happy spot. And one of the girls said to me, and it just stuck with me. She said, I got more out of this yoga class today than I've gotten out of any of my therapy sessions since I've been here. I was like, whoa, you know, just like really being able to like think about being mindful and connection of breath and getting still. And
I just got the chills after you said that.
I know, it was. I was sort of like, wow, that's like, I mean, that's a huge compliment to, you know, because they have access to incredible therapists, and they're doing deep trauma work and, you know, EMDR, the dream therapy. I mean, they're doing like really heavy lifting stuff, but that also requires a lot of effort and a lot of, you know, so for this, it was more like I actually just was able to get out of my head for the last 30, 45 minutes. And
yeah, because today in today's practice, you were talking a lot about how our mind, like just let the mind have a break, just let the body be in this practice. And that's what yoga can really do to help. Like what I've been noticing within myself and through other testimonies about yoga, that it's like it's a time for our bodies to heal. It's a time for the body to like,
for sure,
begin to get confident again, to speak up and to be like, hey, this is what's going on. Like, thank you so much for letting me just kind of have this moment to just kind of be the showcase, and the mind just can kind of settle. Because voice therapy is great, like talking, but our body needs its own therapy, and yoga is like one of and any kind of, that's why there's physical therapy, you know, to like get your body healing. But for trauma, it happens in the body, and we don't always have that opportunity to let the body kind of move through it. So,
and it's really interesting. Like, so I had this practitioner yesterday show up for class
at
here.
Oh, okay.
And she's worked with some of these students out at the school, and she basically said, I loved our class today, because actually she was the only one that showed up. I think because of the snowy day yesterday, people weren't up for yoga. So it ended up being a private. And
you and her.
Yeah, and I said, what do you want to do today? It's your class. And she said, I just, you know, it's my lunch break and I have about 30 minutes. I want to sweat. I want to move a little bit. And I'm like, great, we can definitely do that. And at the end, she said, this was exactly what I needed today. She said, I can't come into a yoga class and just settle in. Like, I need to go through all of those movements, all that breath, sweat. And the term I always use is like, this practice of yoga cracks us open, right? Like, it brings us to that point where at the end, when we've gone through all those movements, all those breaths, like we're ready to settle into that Shavasana state. And so I think that was my experience with some of these girls of like telling them to come in and just lay down and be still and be quiet and be with their breath. Like that was actually really uncomfortable for them. Like that was actually causing more anxiety in their bodies. So yoga is highly personal. It's very personal, like what gets us all to that place where we can sort of drop in, get out of the head. My experience with yoga is that, like, I love to go through the sweaty, challenging, rigorous part of yoga to then for those final few moments. And at We Yoga, every single class has a 5-minute Shavasana. Like that's a non-negotiable because we believe it's that powerful, it's that important. And that's where the good stuff is right there. Yeah. Like I always say that it is the single most important pose of our entire practice. It is the hardest and yet the easiest of all of the asanas. Hard in the sense that like it's hard to turn the brain off and just be still, be present, be quiet for 5, and that's right for 5 minutes. But easy in the sense that you're literally doing nothing. So there's this like all this space in between of like, and then I think we beat ourselves up. Well, I'm supposed to be able to quiet my mind, and I'm supposed to be able to, but I've got that chatter going on. I've got all these thoughts. And
the vritti.
And that's okay because it's just noticing. It's not trying to like push those thoughts away or quiet the mind. It's just sort of observing like these thoughts are coming up. And then sort of like, I like to use the analogy of almost like clouds passing by. Like you're just watching them. You're just sort of observing like, oh, that's an interesting thought. There it goes. Place it off to the side, and then maybe something else would come up. But it's through that quietness and that space that we carve out. Like I said today, like this is your 65 minutes. Like just notice what like comes to the surface, what arises, because that's what's trying to come up. And I think through all the noise and all the clutter and all the everything we have going on in our day-to-day, there's not time, there's not space for that stuff to surface.
Yeah, and we don't, there isn't, or we don't think that it's like appropriate.
Or it does and we push it away, we push it back down. And so I often mention that too in classes, like if you get that surge of emotion, like if you get teary or you get emotional, like don't try to push that back down. Like there's a reason, because getting especially into our hips, like those hip opening poses can be very emotion evoking. Like that's where, especially as women, like we hold those deep-seated, deep-rooted emotions. And if you're in a pigeon pose and all of a sudden you're like, I'm feeling a little weepy, go with it. Yeah. Well, like I know that's what's there.
It is
at a cellular level. Like we are all of our experiences, good and bad. It's all stored in our body, right?
Yeah. In yoga, sometimes it can be shown as like happy and bright and brilliant and positive. And there are that's definitely there in yoga, but it's also just one piece of it. Like there's so much deep darkness with yoga. There's the yin and the yang, and I think that yoga really, and yin is yin the light and yang's the dark, or is it opposite?
That's right.
Okay. And so in practice, like we really, both of those things kind of come up, or not all the time. You're not always going to have like an emotional experience, but the more that we go onto the yoga mat, the more we're going to begin to respect like that darkness that comes up and realize that darkness is there. I need to look at it, move through it, and then you begin to find that light again, because they're equally represented. It's just sometimes the dark can be more overwhelming. And for me, out in my day-to-day life, like if I'm having a tough time going on personally in my life, that's the time that I drag my butt even more into practice. And I
sit with it.
I have to just come here because it's so easy to wallow in what's going on and to just get upset with yourself or the situation. And yoga, for me, what I've noticed when I come into the practice, I just get like these different tools and it kind of gives me a time to kind of like sit with it, or also just kind of put it in a bubble and just like let it be. And then when I'm done with practice, my approach and my perspective of it is like totally different.
That's right.
It's just,
I had a yoga instructor once say that, like just take something that's feeling heavy or something that's kind of weighing you down, and then literally just like set it next to your mat. Like just place it off to the side.
Yeah.
And
I like
just
that.
even for just an hour, like see if you can just sort of like take it out of your frontal lobe and not be with it. And then notice at the end of at the end of a yoga class, like, is there a different perspective? Like, can you see it differently after sort of going through that moving meditation and just...
Well, why does yoga allow us to do that, I wonder? Like, what is it?
It's
about
so interesting. And another thing I will always say is, like, if you have a day that you have, like, your day is so busy and it's slated and you're like, oh, I just don't even have time to go to yoga today, like, that is 100% the day that you should go to yoga. Like, on the day that you don't have time, because there's something magical that happens. Like, when we practice yoga, when we roll up this mat and we step into the rest of our day, like, it restructures, it reprioritizes, like, the stuff that you're like, oh, actually, I can let that go. That's not important. Like, this rises to the top of the list. I think it makes us more efficient.
Yeah.
I think it makes us... we have more energy to tackle those things in a different way, that it doesn't feel heavy and mundane. It's like, yep, I can get that done. I got this, but it's crazy because I hear people say that all the time, like, oh, I don't have time for yoga. Like, oh, I just, got so much going on. I'm like, yep, you should do 2 yoga classes today. Right?
Go to the 6 a.m. and the candlelight.
Yeah. Carve out time for yourself, because that's like you're filling up. I like the lotus mudra, like you're filling up your own cup.
I love that
right?
too.
Like literally fill up your cup, because none of us have anything to give from an empty cup. Like if I'm depleted, if I'm not doing something to take care of me, I'm not gonna be able to hold space for students. I'm not gonna be a good teacher. I'm not gonna be a good mother.
Yeah.
I'm not gonna be a good wife. Like all of those things, when my cup is empty, like I'm drawing from an empty chalice, and there's nothing good that comes from that. When I went through my teacher training,
Where did
one
you
of
do
my
your
instructors,
teacher training?
Down in Scottsdale
Okay.
at One Yoga. He said, for every yoga class you teach, you need to take a class. So, there was one point in my yoga teaching career that I was teaching like 18 classes a week. And I was like, yeah,
Holy
that's
crap.
funny. Like, I'm going to take 18 classes a week and then teach 18. And I noticed that was only sustainable for a short time. Like, I did it for probably 2 to 3 years, taught at that like level of bouncing around. That was when I was teaching at Gonzaga and Leela and Yogashala, the Union. Like there was just sort of like my schedule.
Gosh.
Like I teach here and then I bounce here, and then sub some classes and workshops, and it was.
Were you taking 18 at that time, or just teaching?
And that's what I'm saying. Like I got to that point where I was like, okay, well maybe I'll get in like 2 or 3 on top of teaching the 18 plus. And what I'm saying though is it was sustainable only for a short amount of time, and then I hit total yoga burnout, like physically, mentally. And I remember taking a teaching, I call it teaching sabbatical, a little break. I was like, I gotta go fill up my own cup. Like I am drawing from empty. My body is telling me, my shoulder, I had like a frozen shoulder, it wasn't functioning. I just wasn't in a good spot.
Was it hard for you though to step away?
It wasn't at that point, because I think
Okay.
I was so beyond depleted that I was like, there's no other way. And I think as yoga instructors, we do this. So we fall in love with yoga. Like that's, everyone that goes to a yoga teacher training is like, this thing is the best. I love yoga. I want to like be a teacher. I want to learn. And then all of a sudden something shifts, and then you move into teacher mode, and you're holding space for other practitioners, and we sort of put ourselves at the back burner.
Yeah.
And forget why we fell in love with this practice. And when it becomes more of an output and there isn't an input, I think that's where it gets dangerous. And I think that's where we see, I mean, if you think about it, I know very few teachers that have been able to sustain teaching for decades. 10 plus years. Like you'll see teachers go into it super intense, teach a ton, and then they just sort of like, what happened? Disappeared, right?
Yeah.
We've all seen that. And so I think that is a sign of of a great yoga teacher, one that says, I'm going to take a summer off, or I'm going to go take a 2-week retreat, or do something. And that's a privilege. That's a whole nother conversation of like trying to make a living being a yoga teacher. Really hard.
Yeah.
I've had some really good conversations with some other fellow yoga instructors about that, of like, it's really challenging.
Well, it is, and that's probably why there's that burnout. Because
I think so, because it requires you to teach that 18 plus classes a week, and then you don't have insurance and you don't have sick time, and what if you do want to go take a 2-week retreat? You're not getting paid for
to take a loan out for it.
Right, and you don't, exactly. So it's like finding that way, that sustainability, physically, mentally, financially, all of it.
Yeah. I wasn't going to go there with this, but there is a big talk right now about yoga teachers and payment. What's your...
I think it's really challenging. And so for Christine and I, like moving into this is studio ownership is new for both of us, of how to really put a value on what it is that we offer, and being able to be really confident and comfortable asking for that. Like, it takes a tremendous amount of time, energy, and money to create this space, to heat this room, to pay the rent, to, create websites and have mind body monthly subscriptions and pay our instructors. And there's something about yoga, everybody wants it discounted, everybody wants it free. So there's sort of like that, creating that standard, because I think anytime we discount anything or we give it away, we disvalue ourselves and this practice of yoga, even a step deeper than just yourself. It's really putting, this is a profession, and it does require education, and I don't know if I'm articulating that well, but there's a lot that goes on behind it, and I think
there's a lot of education behind it, and training, and and also and as a teacher, you put in so much of your own time before class. Right. Most teachers do. I mean, it's
not just the hour you teach.
Yeah.
It's creating those playlists. It's thinking about your sequencing.
And getting into the mental headspace of like setting up boundaries.
Yeah.
I've talked to a lot of women or men, not so much men. I haven't talked to many on this podcast yet, but who have gone through like a really hard time at home. And they like when they were going through that difficult time, the biggest part for them was like creating that, they were almost like walking through like a tunnel into holding the space to be a teacher. Like they had to move through like boundaries, a lot of like mantra and breathing, and then they arrived and they were the teacher, because they didn't want to taint that container of the yoga room. Right. So that right there that's really draining to, as well as like preparing for the
it takes a lot of energy to hold space for people. And that's one thing that I would say, like, doesn't really get talked about in teacher training. Is like no teacher, and not any that I've experienced or anything that I've heard of, just like prepare you for like energetically, how are you going to take care of yourself? How are you going to create boundaries? How are you going to fill up your yoga cup? Make sure that you're always coming from that place. And to be really honest with you, that has been one of the reasons over the years that I've been cautious about going into studio ownership, is because I love to teach yoga. Yeah. And there is a freedom to being an independent contractor and getting to just walk in the room, throw your playlist on, teach a great class, and then walk out. Like, you don't have to think about numbers. You don't have to think about any of that. You don't have to think about, changing the toilet paper on the, you know what I'm saying?
There's so many little things.
Mopping the floors, like all of that stuff when you work for somebody else. And I've had that privilege over the last 12 years of teaching for so many different amazing studios, and had different bosses, and everybody's got their different style. And I have a definitely like a newfound respect for it, because I call it the yoga veil. There's like what you see in a yoga studio, and then there's everything like behind that yoga veil that you do not see. And it takes a lot of, and Christine and I are really, I think that's why like doing this partnership at We Yoga feels so great. Like to take this on as one person would be a lot.
Yeah, because if someone doesn't show up to a class, at least you have like at least the two of you can like talk about it, hang out. Like it's not as like personal.
Right.
It's more of like it's because when it's your own thing, it's we get so personal with it.
Right.
And then but when you do share it with somebody else, it's like no, it's a partnership. But then you can even take a step back further than that and be like, it's just a studio.
It's just a
it
studio.
Doesn't define me.
Well, and I told Christine that yesterday when I had just that one person show up for the noon class. I was like, I was so disappointed in some sense of like, this is the coolest place to be. It was like a warm hug, like you said, a warm blanket on a cold, snowy day. Like, why is everyone in Sandpoint not here? Like, this is where it's at. And then just that reminder of like, oh, you guys have only been open 3 weeks. Like,
I know.
It's really like just the beginning and that patience and like slow build, and it's all gonna happen. Like, if I really believe that if you build it, they will come, and it's just planting those seeds. But yeah, that part of it too, where you have those moments of like, oh my gosh, you know, is it gonna be sustainable? Yes, like you have to continue, like just to have that positivity and faith, and the people that we are attracting to this studio are phenomenal. Like the energy that comes in this room is, you saw it this morning. Like that's exactly what Christine and I wanted to create here, like a place of community where you guys are chit-chatting before class.
I love that.
Sharing that connection, and that really, at the end of the day, like that is the main, like yoga's the conduit to create that connection where we all come together.
Yeah.
Because otherwise we would all just stay home and roll out our yoga mats and do some yoga glow or do our own flow. Like we wouldn't come to a space where we could say, hey, we're going to practice together. And then the other thing I love about this location is like where we are situated. This to me feels like the heart of Sandpoint.
Yeah.
Like we are right here at this epicenter where you can go downstairs. You've got City Beach Organics. We've got Beet and Basil. You know, you've even got Starbucks across the street. I love Beet and Basil. It's my favorite. You know, we're right here close to the Bay Trail. Like you could take a yoga class and then go, you know, take a run afterwards. And that's really what Christine and I wanted, was it to be a place of connection where it's like, hey, meet me at We Yoga, and then
let's hang out,
and then let's chit chat afterwards, or
I think
grab
it's
a green
really
juice.
symbolic that you're right here too, because being right at the heart center, that's just vibrating out into the city even more, and like sending those vibes of just like, you know, centeredness, calmness, community, like non-competition, just kind of letting people exist, being who they are and where they're at, and knowing that this place is right here at the center is like
saying that. I've
so
never thought
cool.
of it that way, but it is sort of like it's pulsating out this vibration into our community. That's like, you know, that's one of the things too that we do here. We have a monthly theme, so we go through like all of the yamas and niyamas, and our theme for this month is ahimsa. Every one of our classes, like we're trying to, even if it's just briefly, like touch on that idea of nonviolence to the body. So that's a whole nother topic of discussion of like coming into yoga and continuing to inflict harm on ourselves. Like if you're dealing with an injury and you're not honoring that, you're pushing through it, like that is not practicing ahimsa, that loving kindness to the body. So initially people will say, well, like, oh, I'm not a violent person, I'm not practicing. But like so all these different ways that we start to notice how that word comes up in our life, and so that was sort of the vibration I was imagining when you said like going out into the community of like we're all just practicing that loving kindness to ourselves and to each other. And there seems to be a surge of like female business owners in the area right now. Like we have another practitioner here that's opening her own shop just a few blocks down, and I think there's something really cool when women start supporting other women. That's pretty powerful.
I do too, because right now we're like breaking down all of those like, so I don't really know where it came from, but like that competition between women, like because you have means I can't have it anymore.
Right.
Yeah, like I talked to the Lotus, this place in Spokane, the holistic co-op, and they talked a lot about that. They were like, through their experience of opening up their place, they began to realize that whole veil of the competition and like women competing, it just went away. because they're like, there's no time for that.
It doesn't have to exist.
Yeah, and it really doesn't exist. It's just like, it's just kind of when you are in a more basic mindset of conversation, it's there. You know, people want drama. They want something to kind of, you know, go home and talk about and complain about. But if we can shift that dialogue to be more like real and supportive of other people and not take things so personally,
right,
I think that we can even more get out there and just like, for women especially, can get out there and like let themselves shine, like whatever their passion is, like follow through with it. And there's people, like, we're here to support your vision. And the more that we can tap into that truth, like our world is going to set on fire.
But don't you think that's part of the shift that's happening right now? Like,
Yeah,
I just see it moving.
I do.
I see it moving that direction. And
what shift are you talking about?
I think just the shift towards more of that collaboration and less of that competition. I think that we're starting to see that what you just said, like, me shining my light doesn't have to dim yours at all. Like, we can all shine and vibrate together. Like, it doesn't have to be, oh, you know, and I think we see that. I think we see that in the social media world, especially, of like, oh, this person's doing so great. And that makes me feel, you know, less than or something.
Yeah.
And it's like,
Yeah, and I can't do that because they are. Like, there's not enough space for me.
Yep.
Yeah.
And I think that was one of the things that Christine and I sat with as we prepared to open this space of, we really like sat down with the other yoga studios in the area and had some really open conversations of like, we do not want it to be that way. We do not want practitioners to feel like they have to choose between, like, it's like we compared it to the divorced mom and dad. Like, you got to pick mom or dad. Like, you can still have both. Like, you can, and so we have practitioners that are kind of floating in between. And so I think seeing that, we still practice at the other studio. Those instructors still come over here. So I think we're showing a different way.
That's cool.
Through really like high functioning, and I feel good about that.
Yeah, you should, because that's not easy to do. But having the conversation is just the start. It is. And then
you gotta live it.
Yeah, you do have to live it in order to like begin to bring it to fruition. And it catches on. It really does. And like, what I was just kind of thinking about, what we're talking about is like, everything that we look at was an idea, you know? And Jennifer Lopez, she said something just recently, and I think Jennifer Lopez is just phenomenal. Yeah, she is incredible. And what she said is like, successful people never stopped. And it's not like you have to be successful and like you have like $1 million and like you're famous. Right. It's just feeling successful in what you're doing. And what she means by that is like that successful people never stopped, meaning they never gave up on like their dreams. They never gave up on their idea because, you know, maybe someone told them they couldn't do it, or maybe they had that thought of self-doubt, I can't do it because someone else is. It's like, no, we need ideas. We need new ways of thinking in order for us to evolve as a community, you know?
And someone said to me in this process too of opening the studio, and this resonated with me so much, it's we can't hold back on our goals and our dreams and the things we want to do, and the risk of hurting someone's feelings or, you know, having that. And I was like, that's so true. Yeah. Like, I think sometimes we do that. We think, oh, I can't do that because it's going to upset this person, or that's going to make, like, that's,
you can't
do that. Like, you really have to, like, if something is truly in your heart and it's something you want to do, like, if it's really coming from that authentic place, and just, you know, and I think about our community here in Sandpoint, like, there is more than one place to get dinner. Like, I love Beet and Basil. I love the Fat Pig. I love, you know.
I would go to Beet and Basil though every day.
I probably would go to Beet and Basil.
I just love their food.
We all have our favorites, but it doesn't make any of the other, like, you know, it doesn't make anything less than. There's just like, there's more offerings. Same thing, there's like more than one place to get your hair cut. There's like, you know, and I think that our yoga studios are the same way.
Yeah.
Like, we're all going to find one that maybe like resonates a little bit more with us, and that's fine.
Yeah, the student will find the teacher, and the teacher will find the student.
That's right.
Yeah, that really does happen. Like, and also, like, for you, who's like your teacher?
That's a good question. I like to think that my teaching style is a amalgamation of all of my teachers. So you asked where I did my training. I did it in 2008 down in Scottsdale. And I had 3 teachers in that training, and they were all couldn't be more different. Jen she comes from like a ballerina, very dancey, flowy background. She's incredible. I would say my style is probably the most like hers. The other teacher was John, and he was an Ashtanga teacher, so very like just regimented and disciplined, and probably didn't resonate as much with the Ashtanga style. And then Alex, who he sort of coined hip hop yoga, like, you know, loud music, high energy. So I don't know, maybe I'm a mix in between the two of Alex and Jen, but those were my like original teachers. Because you saw today, like I like to turn the music up.
Yeah.
Like, we're not listening to traditional yoga music in my classes. I mean, maybe a little bit.
I kind of want to get that playlist because that was really good.
I'll send it to you. But I think there's that misconception too, that yoga is sort of like you're listening to this woo yoga music and you're laying in these relaxing poses. And like, no, it can be really fun and high energy, and the music's up. And so I think when I had that opportunity to teach in Spokane at the Union, I just loved that, because it took some of the seriousness of yoga and added some more of that like fun and playful. And like today I loved when you kind of like fell out of that pose and you just laughed at yourself. Like there's nothing, like we don't have to take this practice so seriously. Like it can be.
Yeah.
But it doesn't have to be.
Well, what you said when we first started talking was like the physical practice, we're like cracking open. So you're gonna crack in yoga, like the physical practice. So some people, that's what you need, is just like some high energy, good music, a solid flow that can just kind of crack you out of your shell and just get you comfortable and back in love with your bones. Totally. So you can just like,
and part of this practice is falling, and the part of it's like, okay, well, how do you respond to that? Do you get frustrated with yourself? Do you beat yourself up? Do you say, I'm bad at yoga, I'm never coming back? Or do you pick yourself up, try again? You know, like I think it's just super symbolic, and I see it all the time. People come in and they struggle through it, and you know, they want to find the next pose and the next challenging variation. They're just like so in their head and taking it so serious. And I think that's like when we get out of our own way, like literally get out of our own way and just be like, okay, it's going to happen. Like I was saying today, when you keep showing up, you keep doing this practice, like all of a sudden one day you're like, wow, that arm balance is now available.
Yeah.
Like it wasn't there a month ago, and it doesn't mean it's going to be there a month from now either.
Yeah.
You know, like going through injuries has probably been like one of my more humbling parts of this practice. I remember tearing my ACL about 5 years ago skiing, and I was like, okay, this should be fun. Like I can't even walk, let alone practice yoga right now. But that injury was my biggest gift in being a yoga teacher, because at that time even though I was trained to not teach while you practice, for whatever reason at that chapter in my life, I was like, I want to maybe get my yoga on, I want to move, I want to flow with the group. Well, when that happened, that was not available to me. Like I couldn't, like I said, I couldn't even walk, let alone do yoga. And so I started teaching from a very different place.
Okay.
Where like all of a sudden, if you think about it, when you're practicing yoga, you can't be aware of what's happening in the room. Like if I'm up here doing my own down dog, I have no idea what so-and-so in the back row is doing. Like I can't have that vision of it. And so it got me off of my mat. It got me moving around the room. It got me doing more hands-on adjustments.
Okay.
It got me doing more verbal cueing, because I could see like, oh, that person needs to engage here. It also gave me a completely different compassion for practitioners that come in with injuries. I think up until that point, I was like, oh, just modify, just, da-da-da-da-da. And then I'm like, okay, so when you go through an injury, it's the most humbling, it's the most frustrating. Like those things that you used to be able to do all of a sudden aren't available.
Yeah, in your mind they're there, but physically you're just like, I cannot hit it.
It took me deeper into a meditative practice. Like when I said today, I've spent entire classes in child's pose. I've spent entire classes laying in shavasana, 90-minute classes just laying on my back, saying like, send some loving kindness to my knee. Please heal, you know, because I can't flow. I can't stand up and move and breathe in the way that I'm used to being able to do. But it took me into that place of, I believe that we can heal our body from the inside out. I really, truly believe that our bodies are designed, but we have to believe that.
Yeah.
We have to believe that we have the power to do that.
And was your start just like, like you said, going inward and talking to yourself?
I would actually send breath into my knee, and I would like say like a little mantra, like I'm strong, I'm healthy, I believe that I can heal from the inside out. And knock on wood, I never repaired that ACL. It was a partial tear, and you know the doctor of course was like, you're gonna have to get that fixed, it's not gonna go back together. And but through the practice of yoga, I believe that I was able to regain flexibility, range of motion, regain muscular strength around the joint. It's not, yoga is not high impact. I mean, I probably wouldn't go out and go for a big run right now. My knee's that strong to do that, but I was able to find yoga during that time period. So
yeah, yoga's cool because the pressure is just your hand to the floor or your foot to the floor, and so it's a safe range to begin to build up that muscular strength again. You're not really jarring it.
Exactly.
You know,
you're not putting that impact, that pounding on the joints.
I mean, there's some like the jump back to plank is that you probably weren't doing any jump backs to planks.
Not at that time.
So during that, so you were talking about something that I think is really interesting because every teacher has a different style. And so how do you teach and you walk around and you don't do the practice? Like how has that changed? Or I'm just kind of wondering, how do you do that? Like, do you create the sequence before, or do you and how do you do that? And then also, how do your students respond? Because you probably have some new students in here,
right?
So
that are kind of looking around like, what are we doing?
So what do you rely on to like guide them who need more visual?
Two things. I rely on, for myself, really strong verbal cues, like really being very intentional and about what hand is being placed where and what's moving in what direction. But I also rely pretty strongly on practitioners that come consistently, because you probably noticed today there was a couple people in the room, especially this one over here, that come consistently and can demonstrate. So you noticed there was a couple times I would say, so-and-so's demonstrating this, and it sort of like draws your eye towards that person. So using people. And that's what I did, because when I was going through that injury, I was teaching at Gonzaga, and I love it. It's sort of like a little mini, I loved it when I did it because it was sort of like a little mini teacher training. Like you start these kids from the very beginning. Most of them have never done yoga before, and by the end, you've got them like doing inversions and arm balances and all kinds of fun stuff that they never in a million years thought was possible. My point of saying this was, this happened like right at the very beginning of a new semester, and I was like, oh no, like I'm not going to be able to demo any of this stuff. Like, how am I going to teach this class of 30 to 40 yoga students when I can't move? And then that was when I drew from those ones that actually did repeat the class and do it again. I was like, I actually need you guys to be my front row yogis, and I'm going to need to count on you guys to sort of show as I'm verbally cueing. I need to be able to have you showing the physical, like what it looks like. And it was incredible. And I think it also like kind of empowered those as like, you actually are like my more intermediate to advanced level yogi, that I need your help. And some of those ones even ended up going on and doing teacher trainings.
Oh, wow.
So that's really cool too, like hearing that over the years, these ones that come back and say like, gosh, you were my first yoga teacher in college, and sort of like ended up going on and learning to teach. So there's that gift in it too. Yeah, that's always sort of like, because I think with anything, when you teach something, you you wonder, is it resonating with people? Are they connecting to it? And sometimes you get feedback and sometimes you don't. So yeah, it's always fun when you hear that, like, wow, it actually was like it was a seed that was planted.
Yeah.
And maybe it took a while for that seed to sort of come to fruition, but
Well, it's cool because it sounds like that you showed people that yoga was something that they can actually learn, like a discipline, like an instrument or a study or whatever it is. It's like yoga is a world that you can actually study and deepen your physical practice, but also explore the other limbs of yoga through readings or through some kind of trip. Like there's so many different ways you can get into the practice with meditation and breathing. So it's neat that you were able to let people almost like give them permission, like, you guys, there's more to yoga than...
So 1% of yoga is the asana, the physical practice. So the other 99%, like, that's, as Americans, like, that we have just completely like turned yoga into this bajillion-dollar industry of clothing and yoga mats and the poses and the, all the Instagram cool pics and this and that. Like, that is, like, we're just touching the surface of like, what yoga truly is.
Can you kind of talk about that more, like what yoga truly is?
I think it's it goes a little bit more into, like, like I was saying, the yamas and the niyamas, like the way that we are living our life off of the mat. That's a big one. I think it's really awesome if you're showing up for yoga every single day and you're this kind of badass yogi, but what does it mean if you're going home and you're in an abusive relationship and you're eating a pint of ice cream every night for dinner, or doing things that are harmful to your body? So I think, in my experience with yoga, and this is just my own, and it's watching people come to this practice of yoga, there's this shift that takes place where, when we start practicing that loving kindness with our body and we start taking care of ourselves, we can't help it. We want to eat cleaner, right? We want to put ourselves in environments where we're not surrounded by toxic chemicals. We want to put ourselves in healthier relationships.
Yeah.
All of those sort of toxic and dysfunctional things start to melt away a little bit, because we say, like, gosh, one of my yoga teachers described it as Pandora's box. Like, once you sort of like open it all up and take a look at it, you have to be honest about what's really happening.
Yeah.
And then you look at it and say, gosh, this relationship doesn't fit anymore, or this job doesn't work anymore, or this way of eating is not actually like resonating with my body. Like, my diet completely shifted. I mean, I used to eat fast food. I used to drink soda. I mean, I used to drink milk. I used to eat meat.
What?
I mean, oh my gosh. I was, and those things, like, I never even questioned, because it was sort of like how I was brought up, and they were just normal things in society. And then I remember reading...
You're crazy. Soda and milk? Oh my gosh.
Can you even imagine?
You're wild.
I know. Are you being sarcastic?
Yeah.
Well, I started to notice, though. I was like, you know what? Those things don't actually work for my body.
They're not serving you.
They're not serving me. And I'm not saying I don't, like, have some ice cream or put a little cream in my coffee every now and then. Like, I don't live like that rigidly, but I truly believe that that this practice of yoga has us start to question, do I want to put, what do I want to put into my body?
Yeah.
And how do I want to fuel it? And then you'll start to notice, like, I definitely will fall off the Richter scale, and I'm that same one. Like, on a Friday night, I might go have an extra little gluten fest and a couple extra glasses of wine, and then I show up for my practice the next morning, and I don't feel good.
Like, I honestly want to live a healthy life just so I can have a good practice on the yoga
amen,
mat.
sister. That's my thing. So now I start to think of it backwards, of like, that has been the shift for me in food, of like, okay, this might taste really yummy and incredible in the moment. Like, having a craving for some McDonald's French fries is super real. And that might taste really great in the moment, but then how am I going to feel after I eat that food? Or take it a step further, how am I going to feel the next day when I roll out my yoga mat to practice, when I've got a hangover, or I've eaten a bunch of crappy food the night before that leaves me with a gluten bomb in my stomach, and I feel heavy, and my limbs don't want to move. And so when we start to think of what you just said of like, if the goal is to be able to like show up and have a really great yoga practice, what do I need to do prior to that?
Yeah. Oh, I love that.
Like, would you ever go drive through the drive-thru and have like a heavy breakfast sandwich or a donut or something and then like come to yoga?
No.
I don't know, maybe
it was restorative. If it was restorative yoga,
like I just feel like that would just make me feel so heavy and like weighed down. And I don't know, I might get a little pushback on these, like they might be strong comments to some, but for me, that is my experience, that would not work.
Well, I think it's a good
Not to say that I haven't ever showed up for class with a hangover or a
oh yeah.
Like I said, I don't always practice 100% what I would like to, but at the same time, that's life, and that's like a real natural life consequence right there of like not feeling good.
Well, I like what you're saying, because it's just more about like, what am I doing now, and how is it going to impact me tomorrow or the next day? And that's just what I think the nut of that of what you're saying is. And it doesn't have to be like on yoga, but like if you work the next day and like, do you want to feel like that hangover, or do you want to feel like
vibrant and energetic?
Yeah, and awake. And what we put in definitely impacts like what we put out.
For sure.
And it just, there's so what is it that you do then with, like, what's your certification?
It's basically just a certified health coach in order to be able to coach people through proper nutrition. So the whole training goes through all of the different nutrition theories, because there's 1,000 of them out there right now, right? Like, eat this way, eat that way, eat paleo, eat gluten-free, eat vegan, and there's really, like, at the end of the day, this is why I loved the program so much. It's all about bio-individuality. Like, what fuels your body might be toxic and poisonous to my body. What fuels my body might, like, leave you feeling sick and not well. And so it's this whole idea of learning how to listen. It's a very yogic approach to food.
What's it called?
It is called the Institute for Integrative Nutrition. It's out of New York City. It's all like modular online, and it's a 1-year program.
Well, congratulations.
Thank you.
Yeah,
it
that's
definitely,
a big deal.
I think I got to this place. There's 2 reasons why I did it. The first of which was I got to this place with my yoga where I was like, there's more. Like, let's look at the whole yogi, the holistic, not just this practice, like what we're doing with our nutrition outside of this space. And the second thing that really brought me here was my son's diagnosis with the autoimmune thyroid disease, Hashimoto's. There's a way to heal the body with food. Food is medicine. Food can also be toxic and make us sick and kill us, right? Like the things we're putting in. So like really looking at a very plant-based, like those foods are going to heal the body from the inside out. I believe this practice of yoga heals the body from the inside out. So if we're combining those 2 forces together, like the possibilities are infinite.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. Yeah.
I sort of finished the program, and then Christine and I dove into opening the yoga studio and everything that's been behind that. So it's kind of gotten pushed a little bit back here to the back burner, but I fully intend, I would love to have a handful, maybe a half dozen or so clients, yoga clients that I'm working with that want to come in and take a yoga class, and then maybe spend a little time after class talking about like what's going on. Because if I asked you right now personally, like if there was something you felt like you should change in your diet, you probably know what it is. You probably know like that's something that's not resonating with your body, like something that if you gave it up, you would feel better.
Yeah.
And so like
mine's having a big lunch with like chips that I'll dip in like my like soup, and I'll just mine's like
So when you say big lunch, is it overeating, or is it the chips?
I think it could be overeating to a point, because I've been so through yoga I was going through the Ayurvedic daily cycle. The daily cycle is where you have a nice breakfast in the morning, and then your lunch is your biggest meal of the day, and then your dinner is sometime, like, what is it? Your dinner is 10 hours before you wake up.
So you're having that little fast.
So you have like an intermittent fast. So I'll teach at night, so I try to have like a nice big lunch so that I can be sustained. But I think that my lunches, and they're healthy, like they're homemade soups. But my mindset is like, oh, it's a homemade soup, so I can just have like 2 big bowls of this with like tostito, not Tostitos, but like some kind of tortilla chip.
Yep.
And I'll make like homemade guacamole.
You're making me hungry.
It's so good. But I'll find that I just kind of like just sit there and like I'm eating beyond the point of like being hungry anymore. Yeah. And so that's my thing.
That's the thing. So you know that.
Yeah.
Like intuitively, you don't have to go to a nutritionist or and so I think that's the part about the health coaching that I love, is it holds space for people to kind of tap into that inner knowing of here are the things, and then there's that accountability when you're meeting with somebody regularly to say like, how is that going, and what are some tools that you might be able to provide, or that I might be able to help provide for you to help you sort of like gauge that, of like maybe just giving yourself that measurable, like I'm going to sit and have a bowl of soup and then I'm going to wait 15 minutes, you know, because they say that like if you're already full when you're still eating, you've already like overeaten, because it takes your body 15 minutes, or maybe it's 20 minutes, it's something crazy, to like actually send that signal to your brain that I'm full. So if you're still eating when you're full, you've already gone like above and beyond. So that's been one of my tools of, I'm going to eat like what I feel like is an appropriate amount, and then wait, and then if I'm still hungry, I'm gonna go get a second bowl and I'm gonna eat again. Yeah. Right?
So because we're not gonna deprive ourselves.
We're not gonna deprive ourselves, because it's not about that.
It's just more about listening.
Yeah, because I do that all the time and I'm so guilty of it. Like I'm hungry right now because I got up this morning. I don't really like to eat a big breakfast before I teach. And then I end up sort of doing things like this, hanging out at the studio, doing some cleaning, maybe having a couple meetings. By the time lunchtime rolls around, I'm hungry. Yeah. And so when I'm hungry, I tend to overeat, because then all of a sudden I'm like, I'll take one of those, I'll take one of those, and then I want to go home and have a nap, because I've taken myself to that place where now I'm like, oh no, I'm just tired, because I ate too much.
I hear you.
I do it all the time too.
Yeah.
So I think it's sort of like also having those small little meals throughout the day where it's like, have a power bar maybe before I teach, grab a piece of fruit afterwards, you know, keep myself so I'm here so that my blood sugar doesn't tank. Yeah. Because I found with myself, once my blood sugar tanks, I have a really hard time getting it back. Like there's that crash, and then it doesn't ever really fully.
Now, one place that you would suggest people to visit besides Yoga in Sandpoint, where would you suggest they go?
Oh, in Sandpoint.
Yeah.
Well, we just talked about Beet and Basil.
Yeah.
That's my favorite place to eat in Sandpoint. My heart is huge for Lake Pend Oreille. I sort of say my spirit animal is mermaid. I just love being in the water. So anywhere on the waters of Lake Pend Oreille, like get into some of those deep areas. Many people don't know that it's the largest freshwater lake west of the Mississippi. It's huge.
That's so cool.
And it's beautiful. Like I've lived here for how many years? Probably 20 years of my life, and there's still parts of that lake that I haven't experienced and seen. So.
It's expansive.
It's crazy.
It really is.
Yep.
And there's a lot of neat just trails right out of Sandpoint too. Like you were saying, you could just walk from Yoga and go like walk down to City Park. Yep. Which is really neat. And it's going to be really exciting. So thank you, Kelly, and it was an honor to talk to you.
Thank you. Thanks for your practice this morning too.
Oh, thank you for the teaching.
Yeah,
I was feeling it.
Yeah, you were in it.
Yeah, namaste. Thank you so much for listening. This weekend, Yoga is hosting an arm balance workshop Sunday, May 19th from 1 to 3 p.m. The workshop will be led by Kelly and my guest for episode 13, Jocelyn Rebar. Space is limited, and I'll link to the arm balance workshop in the show notes. Also, I'm going to provide the contact information for Kelly in the show notes for any of you who are listening that are looking for a health coach. If you are ever in Sandpoint, I highly encourage you to attend any class at We Yoga. A link to We Yoga class schedule can be found in the show notes, and please follow them on social media at We Yoga Sandpoint. I hope you enjoyed this episode, and if you like the podcast, here are a few ways that we could use your support. 1, you could subscribe to the podcast wherever you are listening. Another one is you can leave a review. If you leave a review, please put your name or Instagram name in the review and I'll give you a shout out. Another way you can show your love for the podcast is to donate. On the Yogakane website, there is a donate button. All proceeds go back to the different expenses that add up when you host a podcast. A few other really easy and simple ways to support the podcast is to follow Yogakane on Instagram and Facebook and share the podcast with your friends and family. This podcast is just as much mine as it is yours. So if you have any kind of yoga questions, please don't hesitate to send them my way. And also, if there's a yogi in your community that you would like to hear on the podcast, or if that yogi is you would like to hear yourself on the podcast, please feel free to reach out to me and I would love to connect with you because together we make up the yoga community here in the Pacific Northwest. In the next episode, I have the privilege to talk to a really brave yogi who teaches between Coeur d'Alene and Spokane. In episode 12, we actually talk about domestic violence and trauma awareness in yoga. So until next time, let's show compassion and love to ourselves and others. It's still Mental Health Awareness Month, but if you ask me, I think that every day, every month is Mental Health Awareness time. So let's just continue to work that muscle, work that awareness of mental health. And if you are struggling or you feel like you're alone, you are not alone. I support you to reach out to a healthcare professional or someone that you can trust who can help carry this weight. Namaste and Shanti peace to you and your household.